Facing more than $18 billion in debt, the city of Detroit finally filed for bankruptcy last July. Yesterday, a U.S. District Court judge authorized the city to go forward with its filings for Chapter 9. Judge Stephen Rhodes said that negotiating and reaching a deal with the city's 100,000 creditors would have taken far too long and further prevented Detroit from delivering vital city services. Disturbingly, this ruling means that the pensions for thousands of Detroit city employees could be slashed, even though they were guaranteed long ago. So to break down the complexities of Detroit's bankruptcy and shed light on what this decision means for other cities in financial peril, I'm joined now by Richard Wolff, economist and professor emeritus at the University of Massachusetts. Always amazing to have you on, Richard.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Richard, what do you think? Is this bankruptcy decision the best outcome for Detroit?
No, it's not. It's one of the worst outcomes. And I think you're right to point to this issue of the pensioners. It is a historic moment. It is saying to the workers of that city, and in fact to the workers of all this country, that when you sign a contract with an employer and you give up wages and benefits now to get a pension in the future, and the employer agrees with you to do that, that if and when that employer gets into difficulty, they can act as if they never made the commitment. They can forget all that you forwent, all that you did without to get a pension, and take the pension away. When you add that the crisis in Detroit is because large corporations, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, decided it's more profitable to go elsewhere, they could leave behind that disaster and now make the people who worked for the city pay for it by being destitute in their old age. It is an amazing marker of where we have come as a country.
We've certainly come a far way, Richard, in the wrong direction. Let's talk about how Detroit got in this situation in the first place. You talked about the exodus of these auto companies. Also talk about how Wall Street was involved in bankrupting the city.
Well, you know, in the early years, because this decline of Detroit is a matter of several decades now, it speaks volumes to the incapacity of the governors of Michigan, to the presidents of the United States, to all the people that saw what was happening to step in and do something. But because they couldn't and they wouldn't bail out the city, even though they bailed out those auto companies, it left the city desperate, so they turned to Wall Street to get certain kinds of financial help to see them through the hard times. Now they've discovered that those very arrangements that Wall Street, quote unquote, helped them make turn out to have been profitable for Wall Street, but a further burden rather than a help on them, so that they've been hurt not only by the big oil companies, the big car companies, but also by the financial industries. And again, the failure of those arrangements is being taken out of the hides of the school teachers and the garden and park maintainers and the police and fire servers who worked a full lifetime for that city. It is astonishing to watch, and even if you don't understand the economics, the sheer morality of it is mind-blowing.
It is indeed. Let's get more into this pension issue. It's estimated that 23,000 retirees will see their pensions slashed. I mean, is there any way to prevent this from happening, Richard?
Well, certainly. I mean, let's give you just two examples. One, the bailout at the highest estimates of the city's obligations to the pensioners is estimated to be $3.5 billion. By contrast, the federal government gave to General Motors $50 billion. General Motors is a company. Detroit is a city which at that time of the bailout, almost 1 million people. Democracy alone would say, if you can bail out a company for $50 billion, you can find $3.5 billion to save thousands of people's pensions. But the second question is, do something in the relatively well-off state of Michigan to draw in the wealthy, the large corporations who have evaded their tax responsibilities for decades, and say to them, look, you've been making out like bandits. It's time for those at the top, the biggest and the richest, to pay what they should have been paying all along. And if you did that, you would be able to get the money that would be able to have this city honor its obligations to the people who gave lifetimes of work to maintaining that city.
Richard, you just hit it right on the head, which is that Detroit's auto industry has received a bailout many times over. Why is it that corporations are considered more important to bail out than the people of this country?
The irony is because they've made so much money that they have figured out that having become so rich relative to everybody else, both the big companies relative to businesses as a whole, and both the richest among us relative to everybody else, that they're so out of touch with everybody else that they better control the political system, or else the obvious will happen, that the majority will use the one person, one vote electoral system to undo the inequality generated by the economy. And so to prevent that, the corporations control the parties, the politicians, the think tanks. They give the money, they provide the support. And so our politics becomes more and more disconnected from what the mass of people in Detroit, but in the country as a whole, want. And we get these outcomes that make no sense and that contradict the first basis of any real democratic system.
And what do you think about the pushback argument that, it's either pay these promised pension funds or keep utility services operating? You make the choice. I mean, of course, people are going to say, well, we have to keep the utility services operating.
That's a little bit like saying to a person on the street, I'm going to give you choice. You can either have me stab you or I will shoot you. The answer to that is never to argue which is the better way to go. The answer to that is to say, I don't accept that choice. And I don't accept the choice for Detroit of either cutting the pensions or cutting the utilities. My answer is, do something finally to correct the grotesque imbalances of wealth and power in the United States. Help the people who need it most, who've given the most, and who have the least responsibility for this crisis. They're the ones. The reason Detroit is in trouble is because this economic crisis has made so many people unemployed, unable to pay taxes, while a small percentage get very wealthy. Everyone knows that. Go after those people to raise the money they can best afford to do what's right by the people of this country, or else you're driving a wedge inside the United States that we will all come to regret in the years ahead.
Absolutely. It is a false dichotomy. Thanks for breaking through that. Richard Wolff, economist, professor emeritus at University of Massachusetts. Thanks so much.
Thank you.